This one's been a whole year in the making, reaching back and affecting weapons like the Coyote, but with the recent addition of the Entrenched Division Warbond, we've now got a community post pointing out what they call the biggest undocumented nerf. And they brought the receipts as well, so stay tuned for everything, including my thoughts on it throughout. If you want to help support the channel, please hit subscribe. If you're on mobile, please take advantage of the swipe to hype function. And with that, let's dive on in. We've definitely had some of those major orders, especially lately, where you log in, you take a look at them, and you just say, nah, I'm good. And our current MO seems to be falling into that category. Now, when I grabbed this footage around midday today, we had 64,000 intrepid Helldivers logged on and in-game, but as you'll see, not everyone was planet-side, or at least hitting one of the planets of opportunity. Now, in terms of the MO itself, we've got a little under 4 days to pull it off and are currently holding 𝗲𝗏𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗃 5, and that's pretty much where the good news ends. Taking a look at 𝗕cie 4, it actually looks pretty good in-game. I mean, we've got the DSS overhead, the resistance rate is really quite low at just 0.47%, and overall we've got about 16,000 divers there. Okay, decent start. I mean, that all sounds good, right? Not exactly. You see, the one piece of info we could really use in-game is not there, and that is the planetary HP, because you can have a really low resistance rate, but if the health pool of the planet is all juiced up in the back end, it can cause us problems when we try to liberate it. And if we look here at the Helldivers Companion App, we see that 𝗕cie 4 has a health pool of not the standard-ish 1 to 1.5 million we would normally see, but instead, it's sitting at 3.2 million HP and regaining 15,000 health points an hour. All of which would be really great tactical info to have in game, but alas, here we are still asking for it 2 years after launch. But I digress. All this translated means that despite the low regen rate, with that high of a planetary health pool and too few divers hitting the surface, it's going to be a slog to pull off this liberation. Marfark is very much in the same boat, or at least it looks that way at first glance. Now, this is the main MO planet, where we're supposed to get 5 million successful extractions, and we're currently at 1.77 million down, putting us at 35.5% complete with a little less than 4 days to go. Now, the resistance rate on this planet is brutal at 5%, so any hopes of liberating it are slim to none. Actually, just get rid of the slim, it's none, unless we were to get a huge force there and had really high participation rates on the planet. But that's not the MO, is it? Sure, we want to liberate or defend planets as much as possible, but with Marfark, it's just about successful extractions. And take a look at that important detail. Notice it's not successful operations, which would be all three. It's just asking for successful missions. Now, if the last part of that verbiage looks a little suspect to some of you out there, you'd be right. Remember, it was during our blitz of Cyberstan that we saw the hacker incident, where we initially were being tasked with successful missions, and somehow the hackers deployed a repeat attack of some kind on the system and cooked the numbers. And from there, Arrowhead paused that major order. They reset our progress and also swapped it over to successful operations. And of course, we know the rest. We went on to fail that major order. So it's interesting to see them once again rolling out successful missions when it was so easily hacked the last time, unless, tinfoil hats on, ladies and gentlemen, they've discovered how the hackers did it and have deployed sufficient countermeasures to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I just want to be clear here, I've seen no confirmation that they've been able to close that loophole. But probably the biggest curveball Joel and the rest of his nefarious Game Master team has thrown at us is this new strategic opportunity on the other big O, Omicron. Now, we're being asked to successfully extract with 15 million common samples in just over 2.5 days. And when I first saw this one hit the game, I thought to myself, there's no way divers are going to fall for this. But as I've been told on several of my previous videos, never underestimate a Helldivers' desire to squash some bugs. Even with no hope of liberating the planet and up against a high regen rate, almost 17,000 divers are there right now doing battle with the Hive Lords and all the rest of it. With that short of a time frame and needing so many samples extracted, this looks to be nothing more than a distraction, but I gotta say, it seems to be working. With our forces spread all over the galaxy like this, taking and holding a planet is going to be next to impossible, which is what I'm hearing from the community as well. The final bit here before we jump over to the main event is where players are actually diving right now. Now remember when I said that 64,000 divers logged on when I grabbed the footage? Well, the bulk of those are on 𝗙𝗃 4, Marfark, Omicron, and a Crux 9, totaling around 49,000, leaving over 15,000 divers hitting who in the hell knows what planet, or just kind of chilling out on their ships in high orbit. I've asked about this in the past and received more than a few responses from divers saying that they like to hang out on their ships and socialize, which is the opposite of what I do. I mean, we log on as a squad, we assemble on the ship, and it's a few minutes max before we're in a mission and diving for democracy. But if you are one of those social divers out there, drop a comment and let us know what you're doing on your ships for hours at a time, because I think we'd all like to know. Just keep it PG. It's been a while since we talked about some of the behind-the-scenes maths Helldivers the game goes through while we're out there slaughtering democracy's foes, with one of the hottest topics, pun totally intended, being fire. Now, this has been there simmering under the surface and being discussed here and there within the community, but with the recent introduction of the Entrenched Division Warbond, with the 𝗕𝗏𝗆stoker and the cremator turning up the heat, the fire discussion is once again ignited over on Reddit. And yes, I'm done with the fire jokes. To set the stage for this, we need to travel back in time about a year ago, all the way back to patch update 1.003.000. And for those of you who remember when Arrowhead introduced sway and drag into the game, this is that same patch. And what's important for our discussion is what they did to fire in that patch, because it was pretty significant. Overall, AH introduced a burn damage scaling system, doing more damage to larger enemies over time. Fire direct damage, so that's when you spray the flames directly at a target, would also scale depending on the size of that target. Direct damage was also lowered. Again, that's when you're spraying a target directly with the flames. Also, the time to ignite targets was changed up, with larger enemies taking longer to catch on fire. They also mentioned that automatons were altered to be harder to set on fire, with lasers and incendiary ammo being less effective at setting things on fire, but when they eventually did catch on fire, the new scaling system would kick in from there. Now back to the present, and this is where this all kind of started up when I got sent this Reddit post titled "The Biggest Undocumented Nerf," where this user, FitAnswer1073, cites that previous update, 1.003.000, we just talked about, and they've zeroed in on a few weapons like the cookout and the flamethrower, among others, as they try to spell out what exactly was done to fire weapons pre and post patch. Here's what they said about the flamethrower. The status strength was reduced from 10 to 2, the particle damage was reduced from 4 to 2, and the burn damage was increased from 50 to 100, and don't worry, I'll explain all this in just a moment. And they followed it up by saying that with the flamethrower, post-patch, it was now 5 times harder to set every enemy on fire. Your direct damage went from 300 DPS to 150 DPS, and the dot or damage over time damage went from 50 up to 100. They've also listed out the torture, with particle damage being reduced from 4 to 2, burn damage buffed from 50 to 100, with the caveat of the torture being that the status strength is 5 times higher than the flamethrower, so it was unchanged. The cookout shotgun saw its status strength lowered, they say from 100 down to 0.6, that's actually 1 down to 0.6, and the burn damage buffed from 50 to 100, and the incendiary breaker saw the same changes as the cookout, with the fire element being removed from the pellets. Also, when you light a big enemy on fire, it would apply heavy burn, which was nerfed from 400 down to 200 damage. Durable damage was increased though from 80 to 200, and from AP2, which is light armor pen, up to AP4, heavy armor pen. And they finish it up kind of here with a little splash about the cremator having 225 DPS with direct fire and 100 dot DPS, while the pre-nerfed flamethrower had 300 DPS of direct fire and 50 dot DPS. And finally, the nerfed flamethrower shows here is having 150 DPS of direct fire damage and 100 dot DPS. I'll leave a link to these Reddit posts so you can check them out for yourselves, and I'll get to the post in a second, but I feel like, especially with the cremator, fire felt better and in a better place than I remembered it, and when coupled with the stun slow effect, when you hit a target directly with a flame blast, it can really put in work. But for those of you out there attempting the old hover pack, spray a bile titan directly in the face with a flamethrower tactic, this is why it wasn't killing them as fast as you remembered. Now, since this is Helldivers, there's a bunch of hidden figures here when it comes to a status effect like fire. The first is status strength, which I often refer to as an ignition point. Every enemy has a hidden stat that determines how much of a status has to be applied to it before it will essentially take hold and start damaging them. All enemies have it, they're all different, and again, none of this is shown anywhere in the game. Some enemies have higher status strengths, so you have to blast them longer with a flamethrower to eventually get them to catch on fire. There's also another hidden stat that applies a damage multiplier to targets when that status effect takes place, a point this post doesn't factor in. Again, this is nowhere in the game, but if we say take a look at a Bile Titan over on the Helldivers Wiki, it shows fire has a 1.7 times multiplier when applied to a BT. Another popular enemy to hose down with fire are flesh mobs, which actually have a 1.8 times multiplier for fire damage. So, for those of you who remember back when Arrowhead poked fun at the community about not changing the Coyote, but then had to come clean about how they had changed some of its peripherals, these two categories are where they altered its effects. Arrowhead raised the fire status changes on popular enemies like the Warriors from 2 up to 2.1 and the Alpha Commanders from 3 to 4.1. So previously, the Coyote would catch a Warrior on fire in 1 round. After the devs changed it, it took 2 rounds. The Alpha Commander previously took 2 rounds to catch on fire. Post-change, it took 3. Additionally, Alpha and Brood Commanders along with Warriors used to take 100 damage per second once set on fire. After those Coyote changes, they took 80 damage per second, which is what the wiki shows us on a Warrior, 0.8 times fire damage multiplier. And that's how Arrowhead tried to skirt around the Coyote discussion with changes to the systems governing its fire damage, because outright nerfing the weapon damage in game would have been super obvious. Anyways, you've got those 2 effects of status strengths and multipliers along with the other 2 discussed in the post of direct damage, which they sometimes call particle damage, i.e. when you were directly squirting fire onto a target, along with dots, or damage over time, which for anyone who has hosed down the ground or applied fire to a charger, the fire lingers there, slowly chunking down an enemy's health pool. What's missing though from the equation from this Reddit post are the fire damage multipliers, which again vary from enemy to enemy and are again not listed in the game. The pre-nerfed Flamethrower did have technically more direct fire damage than the new Cremator, but, and this is the missing element, the pre-nerfed Flamethrower did not have the advantage of those multipliers. If both of those weapons were shooting at a Bile Titan, the pre-nerfed Flamethrower would do 300 DPS of direct fire damage, but the Cremator, despite having a lesser value of 225 DPS of direct fire damage, would actually benefit from the newer fire damage multiplier of 1.75, giving it 393.75 of direct damage DPS versus that same Bile Titan. Inside this hidden system of status strength and multipliers, Arrowhead can go in and manipulate how long it takes to catch a target on fire and how much damage fire does to the target once it's on fire, which is also a major change to this system, because in the past, fire dots, or damage over time, did a flat 100 damage to all targets regardless of size. From a scavenger all the way up to a 20-ton bus charger, once on fire, those targets took 100 damage per second from the fire damage ticks. But since that update from a year ago, the multipliers have all been tuned up or down to whatever specifications Arrowhead wanted. And for those of you out there with a keen eye, that's why you've seen some differences in smaller targets getting caught on fire versus the way it was prior to that update. Overall, I want to salute the OP's efforts, and I get what they're saying here, like when they show that direct fire damage, which made the Flamethrower so effective versus Charger's pre-patch, was lowered. Also, how damage over time ticks were then raised, but without that missing piece of knowing what enemy you were using as a test subject and what the fire damage multiplier is versus said enemy, the entire equation isn't completely available. However, that said, I think it's clear the pre-nerfed Flamethrower versus the present version's direct fire damage is very noticeable. You used to be able to direct damage a charger down pretty quickly with a Flamethrower, hitting them for 300 DPS of direct damage the very second the flames hit their body, which was among its many strengths and where it tended to shine. Now, once the patch was installed with the new modifiers and such, along with it getting its direct damage cut in half, even with the 1.5 times damage modifier versus Behemoth Chargers, the Flamethrower's direct damage fell from 300 down to 225. And yeah, that's a significant difference that was never really disclosed in those patch notes, which at this point is kind of par for the course with Arrowhead and how they disclose changes, especially those that turn out to hurt certain weapons. Hopefully you found this basic breakdown at least a little bit helpful, and you know, it all kind of makes sense in my head, but if the wording comes out a little twisted or there was a mistake here or there, I want to apologize for that up front. But here's where I turn to you, my viewers, for your input. Now, I know there's other fantastic HD2 channels out there that can present this type of fire status effect breakdown in a much more concise and scientific format, but I'd like to know how you are overall liking the Cremator, the Flam, and how fire is working for you in the game. I also know that there are still host-client issues when it comes to status effects, which I did not touch on in this breakdown, but let's come at this as if you were hosting the session and therefore we're putting down the most fire damage possible. You can comment about any of that, or if you prefer, just drop a general Helldivers 2 comment and I'll do my best to respond. If you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. If you're on mobile, please swipe to hype the video. And before I go, a huge thanks goes out to all of our hardcore channel members and supporters. Until the next one, this is 𝗲𝗲𝗹𝗶𝘀𝗂𝗧, signing off.